Hello, I'm Mary Spicer, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Behind Fashion. In these unprecedented times, the fashion industry, like so many industries, is in distress. Around the world, we have gathered to demand racial and social justice, and no industry is exempt. The hard work must continue. I created this series so that we could support one another and discuss how to move forward in this new fashion landscape in a thoughtful and collaborative manner. Over the next few weeks, I will introduce you to many behind the scenes, from directors to designers to choreographers. I'll be taking questions during this if we can get to them during the webinar. And if you are watching this at a later time, please send me your questions and we will answer them in a timely fashion. With a virus that is discouraging the gathering of people, the touching of clothing, what does the future hold for the fashion industry? How are our roles changing? And will it change our fashions? Today, it is my great pleasure to introduce all of you to Florence Muller. Florence is an art historian and expert on contemporary fashion and the history of fashion. Florence graduated from the Institute of Art and Archaeology, the Conservatoire National des Arts et Métiers, known as CNAM, and studied world art history at the École du Louvre, and earned a master's in art history and archaeology from the University of Paris. Upon graduation, Florence became the director and curator of l'Union Française des Arts de Costume, known as the UFAC, at the Musée des Arts de la Mode at the Louvre. The UFAC was headed by Pierre Berger for a number of years. Pierre was the co-founder of Yves Saint Laurent, and he remained a business partner to Yves for many years. Florence, did you first meet Pierre Berger while working at the UFAC?
Yes, absolutely. I met him while he was the president of this organization, and it was great to be able to collaborate with him, because he is really a part of the great history of fashion through the founding of Yves Saint Laurent he was, at this time, he was president of many organizations, and among them, the organization that is dealing with all the fashion shows for the haute couture and ready to wear. But he was also the president of the Opera House in Paris, which is, very prestigious.
That's amazing. Now, in 2010, you curated Yves Saint Laurent, the retrospective exhibition at the Petit Palais, Musée des Beaux-Arts de la Ville de Paris. And Pierre Berger was the main lender of that collection. And in 2012, you brought that exhibition to the Denver Art Museum. Did Monsieur Berger attend the event in Denver?
Yes, Pierre Berger was there in Denver for the opening. The exhibition that I put together was based on the collection of the Fondation Pierre Berger Yves Saint Laurent. Now it's the Museum Yves Saint Laurent. Pierre Berger was perhaps the first in the fashion world to have this idea of keeping all the design of Saint Laurent, the drawings, everything, the photos, and until today, it's one of the main archive of the history of haute couture. And yes, he came to Denver, and he was with Betty Catrou, the famous Betty Catrou, and it was great to open the exhibition with them.
And for those that don't know who Betty Catrou is, she was a muse to Yves Saint Laurent. And then I believe that Tom Ford cited her as his muse for his very first Yves Saint Laurent Rive Gauche collection.
Yes, you can see her in very memorable images showing the opening of Rive Gauche in London in '69, and she's dressed with a Saharian, a desert tunic, with very tight pants and high boots, and she's super sexy. She's really a figure and an icon of the fashion world, and still today she's really very famous model. I would say she's more than a model, you know, she's much more than this.
I think she's
Um,
what we call an it girl. It's not
yes,
just a model, but an influencer. And she was in the advertisement recently, a photo here of her, and this is Antony Vaccarello.
yes, Anthony Vaccarello, who is the current artistic designer of Saint Laurent. And you can see on this image why she's much more than a muse or a model. She's more a pioneer of the genders, you know, the diversity of genders in the fashion world. She was really showing this way of, she's a woman, but she's showing her masculine side, you know, through her attitude and costume designed by Saint Laurent.
And I think that was one of the things that Eve loved about her. And here's another photo.
Yes, it's a
from
great
the
photo.
advertisement. She's 73 in this advertisement.
Yeah, it's crazy. And she's really an icon for many, many young people. It's really unbelievable. And she has, you know, when you know her, it's not only the image, you know, she's a super rock and roll persona, you know,
Oh.
she's really, she has this way of acting and speaking very, very interesting.
I have had the opportunity to see her speak, and she's amazing. If anyone has the opportunity to find a YouTube where she's talking, it's very interesting. Now, you've curated many other exhibitions worldwide as well. I'd like to name a few: the Dior exhibit at the Pushkin Museum in Moscow, Yves Saint Laurent, the Perfection of Style at the Virginia Museum of Fine Art, Grace of Monaco, Princess in Dior at the Musée de Granville, Esprit Dior, which opened in Shanghai 2013 and then traveled to Tokyo in 2014 and Seoul in 2015. Shockwave, Japanese fashion design, the 80s to the 90s at the Denver Art Museum in 2016. Madeleine Vionnet exhibition and Mode et Liberté. You also became a professor of culture of fashion at the French Institute of Fashion, known as IFM, for 25 years. And you've worked with fashion companies, and I'm going to break this down because I could go through a very long list, but such as Celine, L'Oreal, Louis Vuitton, and haute couture brands such as Chanel and Dior. In 2014 and 15, you were the fashion advisor for the LVMH Prize for Young Fashion Designers. And you have been published in many magazines. Here are a few: Le Jardin des Modes, Jalouse, Mixte, High Fashion, and you were the fashion editor of Surface magazine. You've also published more than 30 books on the history of fashion, such as the Fashion Game Book, A World History of 20th Century Fashion. And I have to say, Florence, I did not realize, even though I had met you, we've walked through the exhibits and everything, that you were the Florence Muller of my book that I absolutely love. I was pulling it out for someone that was staying for a fashion show we were having in March. And I said, oh, that's her book. There is so much information in here. If anyone would be able to get that book, I think it would be wonderful. You've also written Dior Impressions, the inspiration and influence of Impressionism at the House of Dior, Costume Jewelry for Haute Couture, Belles en Vogue, Inspiration Dior. You've co-authored the docuseries Histoire du Look, covering the history of costume for the Art TV channel. You were a contributor for other documentaries such as Yves Saint Laurent in 2008, Costume Jewelry for Haute Couture in 2006, and Art and Fashion for Assouline. Florence, you have been a 3-time winner of the Grand Fashion Book Prize at the University of Lyon. And today you are the Denver Art Museum's Avenir Foundation Curator of Textile Art and Fashion. Thank you so much for joining me today and our audience at Behind Fashion. I truly appreciate you taking the time.
That's very nice to be with you.
And did you get your mug? I dropped it off.
Yes.
to you and all of your successes and to many, many more years. Congratulations and cheers. I mean, really, I really had to break this down to just a few things because I could go on and we have much more to discuss. As I said, I dropped off a mug, and you live in Denver, Colorado with your husband, Goran. but your family is in France. Now, just real quick, I want to check in concerning the pandemic and COVID-19. How are you and your family doing?
I have not seen them since a long time. I miss them, I have to say. We are doing a lot of Zoom, which is nice. They all live in Paris. It was really not easy, when it was the stay at home, because they didn't have the right to go more than 1 kilometer away from the house.
Oh,
It was just it was enough to just go to the grocery store. Then they were not able to exercise, and in the city of Paris, the city of Paris is very dense. I still have an apartment there, and it's in this district there is not one tree.
oh,
Then you can imagine being at home for months. It was not very easy.
yeah. Oh, and we all miss our families. My family is on the East Coast and same thing, but I'm glad that no one has gotten sick and, knock on wood, we're in this for a bit longer. Back to as we discussed, Pierre Berger loaned pieces for the Yves Saint Laurent exhibit. Can you please explain to me how you acquire these pieces for the museum exhibits?
Oh, it's very simple. Pierre Berger did organized his museum very long time ago, at the end of the 70s, in the house of Saint Laurent. And he organized great storages, exactly like a museum, way of keeping collections. And everything has been put into, a very easy way to search on computer. And then I was able to, to tell you more in a simple way, to organize this exhibition, I went through several thousands of creation, design, that I tried on mannequin to see how they look like. Then it was a long process, and I really envision every looks that were kept by Pierre Berger in the today's Museum Saint Laurent.
So to go through thousands and to create this story that you have is absolutely amazing. Touching the pieces. Now, I just love what you do. And I like people to see what, they get to see us, let's say at something lovely and fabulous, the opening of the exhibit, but there is work to be done on the way. And here is another example of you working.
That's a very nice.
Yeah, that was Shockwave.
Yes, absolutely. It's, I am checking the display of a look created by Comme des Garçons, Ray Kawakubo for Comme des Garçons. And it's from the famous collection of summer 1997. And this collection is very important in the history of fashion because it's the name given by her is Body meets dress, dress meets body. But the journalists call this collection the bump dress collection or the monstrous collection, because you can see that, inside the jacket, there are some paddings that are really reshaping the body in a monstrous manner. And the whole why she did this, because she's very well known for her very avant-garde design. She was a pioneer of avant-garde fashion when she started to show her collection in Paris in 1981, and she wanted with this collection to challenge the classic, the traditional vision on the way a body should be, a feminine body should be.
I just think that's amazing, and to go through the pieces and of different collections, I think is fantastic. You've worked with so many different designers, as we've even just mentioned two right there, with these exhibitions. Have you been dressed by any of these designers for the openings of the exhibitions?
Yes, very often I am able to borrow dresses from the designers. I think the first one I borrowed was from Paco Rabanne a very long time ago. And then I was a very close friend and a real fan of Azzedine Alaya. And then I borrowed a lot of things, and I also bought a lot of his look. I have a huge collection. Same thing with Jean-Paul Gaultier, Thierry Mugler, Comme des Garçons, I have a huge collection, and I was able, to buy the samples from the show because the journalists and the people in the fashion world were invited to private sales in the company. But yes, I like this way of being involved with the fashion design, because to me it's not just only a historical way to be involved or a theoretical way to be involved, but I like to experiment the style on myself in the real world, because the fashion show is not exactly the real world, and like the dress I'm wearing of Balenciaga by Demna Gvasalia, and you can really have a feeling, and you see how a design can interface with your behavior, your gestures, your way of being. It's very interesting.
It's true. When you put on a piece of clothing, it will change the way that you stand. I have seen many models when we put them in a piece, or even just myself, I'll put on something and my entire stature changes the way that I look. Sometimes people say, oh, you're making the face when you look at the back, but you do get this interesting feeling when you wear certain pieces. Now, I have a question. This is a picture of you and Betty from the Dior opening in Denver. Now, did you get lent this outfit, or?
I didn't borrow this dress from the Saint Laurent house, I mean from Pierre Berger, because at this time the Saint Laurent couture house didn't exist anymore. It was,
Oh, she'll come back. I've lost.
A very good friend, Anushka, and Anushka is very famous in Paris. She has this company, Maison Anushka. She's like an archive of the whole history of fashion, more than 100 years of history of fashion. She has thousands of designs from all sorts of designers, and she's helping the fashion creatives by showing them archival pieces, and they can be inspired by this. And this is a Saint Laurent dress from the 70s, from her archives.
Can you say the name of her shop? Is it a shop?
No, it's not a shop. You can't buy the clothes. It's like a library,
Oh.
It's like it's a showroom, but it's only for designers, for artistic designers and their team, and they go there by appointment, and they are able to see things from all sorts of decades, and they can be inspired by these dress and costume and designs. It's mainly dresses, accessories. There is no drawings. It's only objects, fashion objects. And the name is Maison, like we say in French, house, Maison, Anushka. Anushka.
Anushka. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Now, you and we touched on this a little bit just a second ago, that the fashion shows that you have attended are absolutely stunning. Alexander McQueen, John Galliano, but it's very different to see the clothing in a fashion show versus on the person. But just from a fashion show perspective, could you share with me your top 3 fashion shows and why you would choose those?
Yeah, it's very difficult to answer and to just quote 3 fashion shows, because I have seen so many incredible things. But I would say perhaps the show of Thierry Mugler for summer 1984 at the Zenith. It was extraordinary. First of all, it was in a concert hall, the biggest in Paris, and it was open to the public. People could buy a ticket to attend the show, and it was extraordinary. You know, the mise en scène, the set design. There was, you know, like a Virgin that was going down from the ceiling. You know, it was Pat Cleveland dressed with, and there was angels, and it was really amazing. Then there are many things that I remember, but perhaps, you know, one of the Martin Margiela 1990, because the show was happening in a very special place, in a very, I would say, poor district of Paris, in a place used for garbage, and we were literally seated on trash, you know, and there was all the kids of the district that were involved in the show. You know, they were showing themselves with the models, and the models were wearing these outfits made with a recycled plastic bag, not sewn but taped. And it was, you know, it was very early on, this idea of recycling, very interesting. And it was in the middle of winter, it was freezing, and there was this big, you know, pot of hot wine that you could drink to keep you warm. No, it was really. And then perhaps I would say one show of Galliano for Dior that happened for the summer 1998 at the Opera of Paris. You know, in the famous Opera Garnier, which is this opera built in the 19th century. The decor is unbelievable, very Barocco, and the whole collection was everywhere in the opera, you know, and it was totally extraordinary. But
I
there are
think that was
many
the
others.
one where the models would come down. Did they come down a
Yes.
staircase and then go through rooms, and
Yes.
some would dance?
Yes, absolutely. They would go down the staircase, this very you know, beautiful staircase, and they would be the dresses were inspired by Paul Poiret, you know, the 1910 and the 1920s. And there was also dresses inspired by Marchesa Casati, you know, who was one of the figures that Galliano was really fan of. And yeah, there were wigs, and no, it was unbelievable.
There was a lot of history woven into that, and I just thought that was really fantastic. And then I can see why you chose those three. Absolutely. But having a favorite fashion show is very different than having a favorite collection. What would be your top three collections?
Again, it's super difficult to answer, you know. I can try. I would say in the 1980s, Jean-Paul Gaultier. You can quote many collections, but perhaps the collection of 1985, which includes skirts for men. And it was really very, very new at this time to show boys dressed with skirts and dresses, you know. And it was, again, you know, pioneering the gender representation. Then I remember this. At the Dinalaya also, I would say perhaps the summer 1991 called the Tati collection, very inspired by the street style, inspired by a store called Tati, where you can find things so inexpensive, where everybody can be dressed for really nothing, you know. It was before H&M. and in this collection, this collection was a lot about the body representation, very sensual bodies. There was Naomi Campbell was one of the stars of the show. She was so gorgeous and cute, and it was, let's say, almost like a body art, exactly like you would speak about some artistic movement.
Mm-hmm.
And then, difficult. I would say one of the collection of Nicolas Ghesquière at Balenciaga. Very futuristic. The shaping of body was very interesting and very futuristic.
Oh, Florence,
But
I'm sorry.
also you can
I
quote
lost
Racine.
you. I lost you right at the beginning of this third one. Can you repeat that, please?
Yes. The third show that I would mention is a show for summer 2008 by Nicolas Ghesquière for Balenciaga. And because it was very interesting in terms of technique, in terms of textile research. It was mixing silk and neoprene. Neoprene was hidden under the silk, and it was using prints from the 60s, with flowers, but it was very futuristic, and he really found a way to reshape the body in a very interesting way.
Wow. Thank you so much. I mean, I love to hear what you're interested in, and what some of the things are that really jazz you up. Now, did you recently, with the pandemic, fashion shows are online. And so did you get to see the Dior fashion show that was online for Paris Fashion Week?
Yes. Yes, so beautiful. I mean, it's so, I would say, very poetic, it's a fantasy world. It's these beautiful girls, beautiful goddesses, almost, and I love this story of the miniatures, brought into a trunk, traveling the world, meeting these muses, in forest, which has a lot to do with mythology,
Mm-hmm.
This is really interesting.
But now, weren't you the first to bring to display these miniatures in an exhibit? Because once I saw that in there, I thought of you. They opened this. If anyone has not seen it, please look at it on YouTube. But they open this this trunk. There are these porters with this trunk, and it looks like the house of Dior. And they open it up, and there are these miniature dresses. And I do have a quick photo I want to show so that people understand what we're talking about from the Dior exhibit.
Yes, you can see a display of all sorts of accessories, and on the upper part of the photo, you can see one of these miniature, and it's the miniature of a very famous dress in the history of the house, the Juno dress, designed by Christian Dior in 1949. And these miniatures were, I mean, it's the idea of, showing a savoir-faire, how you can reduce a life-size dress to a very, short, petite size. I think the first time I did curate an exhibition about Dior that was showing this miniature was in Asia. And really the visitors love it, because especially the kids, but not only the kids, the adults also love this different size, and it's like, it shows the knowledge of the atelier, of the workshops, how, because to reduce from the life size to the miniature, you have to find the proper fabric, the proper embroideries, motifs. In fact, it's even more difficult than to do life size.
Oh, and the detail is absolutely amazing to see them. I just spent a lot of time at those tableaus. You had them in different colors, red, blue, green, yellow. And I just thought it was amazing. And I wonder, did they create these many years ago to bring around because it was easier to travel with, to show people that would want these?
It could be seen exactly this way
Mm.
because in the house they were inspired by the tradition that goes back to the 18th century. In the 18th century, to advertise the design of the Parisian couturier, it was not described like this, but anyway, they were doing miniatures of their creation, and these miniatures were traveling in Europe, and they were going to all the main cities in order to eventually get some demand of dresses. And right after the Second World War, in 45 and 46, there was an organization that was made by all the French couturiers called Le Petit Théâtre de la Mode, the little theater of fashion. That was exactly the same way, you know, it was miniatures, and it was traveling first in Europe and second in the US to give a message, well, the French couture still exists. The houses, and they have not disappeared. We are there. We are still inventing great things. And if you can go back to Paris to look at this collection, that would be great. That was the message right after
And
the
here
Second
we are again. Here we are again with this same message. We are still here. We are still making the dresses. Fear not. Now, the Denver Art Museum has reopened. Do you have any plans for a fashion exhibit in 2021 that you might be able to share with us?
Yes, absolutely. I'm currently working on an exhibition, which, you know, the dates have been changed, of course, because of the virus. The agenda of the museum's exhibitions have changed. But yes, it will happen next year. And it will be an exhibition that will go through the 50s to the 90s, and it will be a cross story between Paris and Hollywood.
Oh,
And it will
yes.
show how, you know, there was connections between these two cities that are so glamorous and elegant.
Oh, that's going to be wonderful, and maybe a little Edith Head conversation in there as well, as there was some battling going on. Well, please keep me posted, and we will let everyone know when the dates are finalized. And we're just so all excited to see what's coming up at the Denver Art Museum. And thank you, Florence, because with you as the curator of fashion and textiles, the Denver Art Museum is quickly becoming the most influential museum for fashion and design in the world. Thank you so very much for coming on Behind Fashion with me. What a wonderful treat for all of us. And I'm so glad we could learn more about you and your history as you continue to help us to learn about the history of the art of fashion.
Thank you so much, Mary.
Thank you, and have a wonderful day. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And thank you all for attending this week's Behind Fashion series with my guest, Florence Muller, the Denver Art Museum's Avenir Foundation Curator of Textile Art and Fashion. Next week, we will go behind fashion with stylist, fashion editor, and consultant, Georgia Benju. See you next Wednesday, July 29th at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, noon on the East Coast, 9 a.m. West Coast, and 5 p.m. British Summer Time. All the best to you and yours.